Council. I say, I think the unity of Latin America and the Caribbean is more important. I say, I want you to look at the next period of time. Tell me who will be contested, who advancing their names. And then he says, well, there's Brazil there, there's Mexico, you don't want to go against them and so on. And then we settled on 2019. He said to me, why are you waiting till 2019? How are you sure you're going to be in government in 2019? We're talking about 2009, you know. I said, well, we put our marker down. If we're not in office, hopefully, whoever succeeds us would look after the interests of St. Vincent and Grenadines and see the importance of this. He wasn't happy with me, Camilo. He said, we can win the thing, you know, we have the support. I said, yes, but we will fracture the unity in the Caribbean and Latin American civilization, and that is important. I say, of course, he had no choice but to agree with his prime minister. And we continued to do our work. So that time is also important, how you see things and what are the other objectives. These things come from, I come back to it, understanding and wisdom and judgment. And as the good Lord had it, we did it in 2019. Ecuador, El Salvador, they didn't have the considerations of in 2019, June 2019, June the 7th, 2019, when the vote took place. They were not concerned about unity of Latin America and the Caribbean. They had this ambition to be there. But we had already lined up the votes, even though the American government at the time supported El Salvador. But it was an amazing victory. Small but mighty, we won of the 193 members in the Security Council. I mean in the General Assembly to vote to the Security Council. We got 185 votes. El Salvador got 6. And 2 abstentions. I'll never forget the meeting. The permanent representative of the People's Republic of China, you know, we don't have relations with them. So they asked for a meeting with me to talk about going to the Security Council. They said that they'll support us if I break relations with Taiwan. But what the interesting thing even before, he said, Prime Minister, I want to indicate to you that this is not a meeting. I'm not permitted to have a meeting with you. This is an encounter. Nevertheless, I had an encounter. And he raised this question. I told him no. I didn't need his votes to win because I know what I had locked up already. In any case, I would not put that above our relationship with Taiwan. The decisions which you make on an ongoing basis, some of these things you don't, only when we get opportunities like this to talk about. In the rough and tumble, you don't often talk about these things. That was a mighty deed for a small country. But there are others too.
Thank you, Prime Minister. Now, many things are said about Comrade Ralph. Say what you want about him. Whenever there's an impending disaster or storm, the people of St. Vincent and the Grenadines feel a calm and an assurance, maybe Ralph assurance, but assurance nonetheless, that
I wish,
Comrade Ralph.
I would wish them to insure their houses though, to have it. rather than rely on Ralph Assurance. It'd be good if they could have some insurance.
they feel a sense of assurance when the Prime Minister is in state, especially if a storm is approaching. And Prime Minister, you remember, before I became a senator, I was giving you the joke that there was one occasion where a storm was approaching, and I heard a lady in Kingston saying, "Thing is it, Ralph not even there, and storm a come." So I knew then and there that lady, she felt a little, nervous that you weren't here. But I said all of that to zoom in on the approach that we take as an administration in the aftermath of disasters. And we have seen our fair share of disasters in St. Vincent and the Grenadines, particularly Hurricane Beryl, Prime Minister, that ravaged and destroyed St. Vincent and the Grenadines, especially the Grenadine Islands, the southern Grenadines in particular. And as you always do in your way of doing things, you exude and you always encourage us to have a patience and a calm. And you outlined 3 very important things that we have to focus on, which is relief, recovery, and reconstruction. And over the last year, the administration has been able to roll out a number of programs geared towards supporting those who were affected by Hurricane Beryl. And it is mentioned here in the article on page 141, huge progress on relief, recovery, reconstruction. And we noted that the laser focus of the Unity Labour Party government at this time is to deliver optimally in all the practical circumstances on its 3 conjoined processes of relief, recovery, and reconstruction, the 3 R's. Luckily, we have a 4th R in the person of Ralph Gonsalves. The second paragraph says, in all these respects, optimal outcomes are in evidence through the amazing efforts of the government in communion with the people as a whole and our friends overseas. Only the eyes of the politically jaundiced, the unreasonable, or the disinterested are not seeing the remarkable progress made on all the relevant fronts since the damage, destruction, and devastation wrought by Hurricane Beryl on 1st July 2024. And it said a mere 7 weeks ago. Huge progress is continuing despite the enormous challenges arising from the extent of Beryl's damage, destruction, and devastation, the 3 Ds, the limitations of material resources, and the stretching of the constrained capacities in the public and private sectors. I've made the point locally, regionally, and internationally that what our administration has undertaken, Prime Minister, is unlike what this country has ever seen in the aftermath of a major hurricane like Beryl. If you can give us some insight into what we have been able to achieve within the last year, because we've been saying it, but I think it bears repeating, that what we have done, and I've described it as a Herculean task. Give us your insights on that, please.
Yeah. Well, let me just say this. For those persons who haven't seen the book yet, this book has 54 articles, and many of them deal with Beryl, because these articles come from January the 1st last year till the time of publication, September. I think in August or early September was one of the latest articles. So people would see in this book the way in which the party has been putting out on a weekly basis in its newspaper column the progress, what we have been making, what we have been doing. Of course, we have gone on radio, we have gone on TV, and so forth. But those who miss those things could get it every Friday where we were going by taking the newspaper. And this is very important because we are responsible to the people and we have to be responsive also to them. Always. I always remember that and I always drill that down. I want to say this. When you do an exercise of this kind, let us take burial money. We have paid monies for over a year to over 5,000 and something persons to support them. $600 a month. This is just extraordinary. Nothing like this has ever happened. But because of the nature of the numbers, the size of the numbers, you're always going to have some persons who should have gotten burial money and didn't get burial money. And I tell people all the time that we must not, while you aim for perfection, on this side of Beulah land, we're not going to have perfection. And I want to say this, and you know the firmness with which I respond when the opposition says it in Parliament. That, oh, people, you give burial money on the basis of political discrimination. Only ULP people. You give money to mainly ULP people. I mean, I find the charge to be so offensive and I always rebut it. If anybody thinks that I dedicate 57 years of my life to the political work with the people and service with them throughout this Caribbean and suffered a lot. Oh, they have honored me. And Almighty God has advised them to honor me accordingly by having me lead this country for the last near 25 years. And Almighty God will guide them again. If anybody thinks that I will discriminate against somebody on the basis of politics, they have another guest coming. Kisal, I'd said to Kisal, who is doing a fantastic job at mobilization, I said, I meet a number of people who complain. From their records they have checked, and they have come up with 600 and something?
Yes.
They have come up with 600 and something persons who somehow received burial cards and did not get any money on their cards.
Yes.
There may be others too who didn't get any cards, but I can only deal with one problem at a time in this kind of a context. And she came to me, she just took it to cabinet last week, Wednesday, and we approved for those 600 and something persons to receive for the last 8 months.
Yes.
Their $600. It is coming up to $3.3 million.
Yeah.
We're hoping to pay that shortly.
Yes.
We just took that decision. This is not election campaign. This is no gimmick. This is a rigorous process which we went through. And she brought the list finally with these numbers. The In fact, the wise electoral thing to have done would be to say, girl, there may be another 600 out there who didn't get cards and who should have get money. And then going to keep a lot of noise that they don't get. I say, but we have to do right with whom we can do right.
Yes.
Whatever the consequence. In relation to the housing, which we have done, you know, Eloise will marvel. The members of the cabinet will marvel. People who want metaphorically to cut my throat politically every day of the week, when they have a problem and they were to come to me or call me, be surprised with the open manner in which I receive them and address whatever issue they have without recourse to any partisan political consideration. I have to satisfy myself and my conscience. I mean, I'm a tough as nails politician, but I have to do this because it is the right thing to do. Now, sometimes I will look for my own supporters for that. But they face in their God, which is my God, and I face in mine too. I have my questions I have to answer. And there was a case where I approved for someone which really saved their lives. We had to spend $400 and something thousand. Wasn't that number, Cabsec? Angie? $400 and something thousand on their medical. They subsequently died, but not from what they had. Problem which they had. And they came and showed me this. And I approved it. And Angie was standing with her, Cabsec says, you see this, you know who this person is? I said, yeah, I see the name, I know who this person is. She said, and you did it so easily. I said, Cabsec, if you had the responsibility, you would have done it easily too. I have to answer to my own conscience and my God as to what I'm doing, whether it's right or wrong. $400 and something thousand. I haven't said it, even though they write and say that this person never helped them and all the rest. Totally untrue. In the housing, where we did a lot of work, we began the process when the estimate was done. The estimate was about 5,000 and something houses. Burial plus, as Gomri always insisted, some residue from Soufre, 5,000 and something. The assessment which we did, it would cost us $485 million. No country in the world has ever attempted something like what we have attempted. Not even the great America. 20 years ago, Katrina, they didn't pay any attention to the people. Poor people, especially poor black people, still living in temporary accommodation. And I mean, the thing is awful. It's a blight on the American civilization for how they treat those persons. Not getting involved in American politics, but in the context of what we're talking comparatively. I said we didn't have all the money, all the 485 million. But if we even had all the money, I didn't have all the workers. And if we even had all the workers, I didn't have all the materials, because the materials take time to come to us, and there are gaps. We don't produce, we produce galvanized in a certain quantity. We don't do cement, we don't do lumber, nails, etc., etc. The number has moved from 5,000 and something to over 8,000. We have fixed up or rebuilt 5,000 and something houses, and Orlando Brewster and his team, they have done a fantastic job.
Yes.
And the people recognize that. That's why he's such a star on the campaign trail. Not only for his good looks, which are quite authentic, but also for his tremendous work and his heart. Now, I say to everybody, life goes on. I know it's difficult if you need your house fixed and you can get it, you need some materials. So we probably have about 2,000 persons out there, 2,000 something, whom we still need to fix up with materials and the like, because sometimes when the assessment is made a few months ago, the house may appear okay, but then in the passage of time, a deterioration takes place and the source is the initial problem. So it's not that some people trying to game the system, but that's a small minority. I always tell my colleagues, the bulk of people are people who genuinely require help arising from the disasters. And I said to them, not everybody will get their house fixed or get their materials before the general elections. And I said to them with complete rationality, and this is the beauty of both slogans, both rubrics, both themes for this campaign. Labor is working for all, and own the future. They're both connected. What we have done, what we're doing, and the future. I say, if you're voting primarily on the basis of whether you get materials or not, or get your house fixed or not, and you ain't get it fixed yet, or you ain't get the materials yet, and you don't get it before election, that is all the more reason why you must double down and go out and organize to help Labour come back to office, because the only one who can fix your house, and the only leadership which will get it done is the Unity Labour Party leadership, because before the rest never even build one single house. And they running away from the discussion on housing. Like how Jumpy running away from holy water. They, all the talk here, they ain't got nothing saying about that, And they know why. So, look, the cleaning up alone. The cleaning up down in the Southern Grenadines took over $25 million. The barge, which we use, and to send the stuff down to Trinidad, which they use as scrap. Every day, that barge is in the harbor or going down. It's $10,000 US a day. Very expensive. And then we've gotten assistance, we've gotten help. You have to plan. You see, I figured out pretty early that you need in hand at any one time about $120, $130 million before you put on your boots to go look for help. So what we did, we say 1% on that to set up a contingency fund. So you will have, we have been having on an average a major storm every 2 years. That is what it has been since 2001, plus Sufre and plus COVID. We have had big hurricanes like Beryl. But every 2 years we have had in something significant. So you have to prepare for it. So we have the contingency fund. And if you have to spend every 2 years out of the fund, we figure out you might have about $50 million, $60 million in the fund at any one time. Given naturally as the economy gets better, 1%, if you collect $200 million in VAT, 1% of VAT is less than if you collect 300 million. So, figure out you got about 50 million in VAT, in the contingency fund. 50, 60 million. Then we negotiate with the World Bank to have what is called a CATDDO, Catastrophic Deferred Drawdown Option. $20 million. We don't use it. We leave it there. Borrow it. But that's 54 million. Now within 2 days or so, 3 days of I declaring a national emergency. You see, when I talk on the night before the storm comes, and I say, or the hurricane, I say, accordingly, in accordance with such and such a provision of the National Emergency Management Act, I declare that an emergency is impending. Either it's impending or it has happened. That declaration is what opens the door to get the money from the World Bank, which you negotiate before. And then within a day or two after that declaration, 3 days maximum, the money goes into our account into the central bank. So that's 50, 60 plus that other 54. Then we always have a standard thing with the CDB to get 5 million US loan. With the CDB money, we have to spend it and then reclaim it. So we have to have that elbow room. And then from, say, Taiwan, you'll pick up another $5 million anytime that US, whatever time that happens, before you put your boots on. So you have that arranged to do immediate relief. The money which you hear people will give you $100,000, $50,000, $200,000. That's really for relief. That doesn't help with any reconstruction. And my experience is this, over the years, is that when the immediate relief issue is finished, you're on your own. You're on your own. They forget you. They've gone on to something else. So you have to plan this thing, and you have to have the knowledge and experience. When people see it happens easily, it's not easy. You make it look easy. So I'm answering your question to show that what is happening, you have to plan. And you have to have, we have a good NEMO law. We put that in place. We put NEMO in place. We put all those matters in place. And I am the minister responsible for national emergency, which is always very important. I'll never forget once when during the NDP time there was a minister who was responsible for the monitoring for SOFRE and so on. The fellow went on radio the morning, and the man was so frightened. He wasn't pausing between words. He was pausing between syllables. When I heard the man, I get so frightened. Son Mitchell realized that too. Son Mitchell take the thing off of the radio station, and he's the man who come on afterwards and talk about it. So I talk about it from first. I go there, as you say, with a patience and a calm. You can't have a man when in a disaster coming on and talking to you. Buju, they can't talk to you. They can't have no gaps between words, or between syllables. By the time that my frightened man want to go to the airport and run out because they don't take boat, go somewhere, you have to give confidence to people. So there are several things you're taking into account. The police and the volunteers and everybody. And when is a disaster like SOFRE, we must not forget, and this is where regional integration comes in, the Seismic Research Center, which is paid out of the central funds of the university. That's something under the Vice Chancellor. That's not in, though it's located in Trinidad, it's not funded under Trinidad. The PNM government, our sister party, cut their contribution by half, and we had to increase our contribution because they cut their contribution across the board for funding under the Vice Chancellor. They weren't cutting it for St. Augustine, the university in the campus in St. Augustine. They cut it in for what was under the university generally in their cuts now. And that got affected. And we had to put up more money. So all those things have to be put in place. You have to prepare yourself well in order to get to relief. And you have to have the machinery for reconstruction, for recovery and also for reconstruction.
Thank you very much, Prime Minister. Ladies and gentlemen, we've had a wonderful conversation. Please give our distinguished sons a round of applause. And now I will invite you to be a part of the conversation as we open the floor for any questions to the Honorable Prime Minister or Dr. Cleve Scott. And I will remind members of the audience to keep your questions, short, succinct, bearing in mind that we want to give our sons the opportunity to answer and other members of the audience the opportunity to ask their questions as well. So the floor is now open for any questions. I believe we have a roving mic. Yes. Are there any questions?
I want to start off by saying and sharing some information which you don't know, but I know.
That's Bones Bonady.
Yes.
Yes.
That gentleman up there, Ralph Gonsalves, was thrown out of Barbados. He was a professor at the University of the West Indies. And the Prime Minister, Tom Adams, decided he will make him persona non grata from Barbados. And somebody whispered something to Tom Adams, the Prime Minister. Is he crazy? You can't do that. Withdraw his work permit. Because if you do that, you're sending him down in St. Vincent to give Milton trouble. I tell you the inside story. He challenged the Prime Minister of Barbados to debate at the Catholic Youth Center. I believe every Vincentian in Barbados turned up.
That was at Black Rock.
Tom Adams is missing.
I really didn't challenge him with no Burns. What happened is this: an organization got Prime Minister Adams, myself, and somebody else. It might have been Wendell McLean to have a debate, but Tom didn't turn up.
He didn't turn up, but the place was packed with Vincentians.
Yes.
I introduced Ralph Gonsalves to the Labour College, and he was every program regionally held at the college, he was one of the lecturers.
I did it free.
Of course, well, I didn't want to say that. So I'm just telling you. So eventually, what they did is to withdraw his work permit instead of a total ban in Barbados. So a lot of people do not understand the nature of the man, Ralph Gonsalves. I made a little note here. I remembered when Tom Adams, when Bush hit you on your shoulder, I was there.
Yes. In Quebec City.
In the conference in America.
Yes.
And you know how it stole the show? You introduced Kevin Little. You remember?
Yes, yes, yes.
As one of the entertainers in Washington.
Yes.
We were there and he came in and he hit you on your shoulder. Hi, Ralph. That's what he said. I was present at that. The Prime Minister of Trinidad and Tobago brought up a whole big side. You remember?
Yes.
A big side, but we had Kevin Little. He steal the show. So I just want to say, we in St. Vincent and the Grenadines, we don't know the nature of the man who we have as our Prime Minister. I mean, the supporters of the Labour Party, no. But I'm talking generally speaking. They not understand the scope of this man we have as our Prime Minister. I said today on the radio, Prime Minister, that you led the win Jamaica, and the demonstration, the support that you and the students gave also produced not only one Prime Minister, but 3 Prime Ministers in the Caribbean.
That's true.
We have a good man.
Bonds, you're right. In 1969, when we graduated, the first time and the only time, 3 Prime Ministers came out of that year from Mona. Bruce Golding was my good friend. We were in class together, Patrick Manning and myself. Not a bad year at all. Not a bad year.
That's one of the reasons we had the man in military in St. Vincent Grenadine.
Not a bad year.
All right.
Thank you very much, Mr. Bonadi. Are there any other questions?
Yes, there is. Prime Minister, you mentioned a number of other Prime Ministers, and I'm curious to know your thoughts on one in particular, Eugenia Charles.
You know, Eugenia is a very interesting individual. My mother-in-law was a strong supporter of Eugenia Charles. People up to 1980 in Dominica were not very much inclined to support the Freedom Party. The Dominica Labour Party was the organization, originally headed by, well, the labor movement before it coalesced in 1955 by Low Black, a trade unionist who didn't finish primary school or just barely finished primary school, and a white woman, Phyllis Shawn Alfrey.
Who E.T. called Alice in Wonderland.
Yes. And she has written The Orchid House.
Yes.
She was a Minister of Social Services in the
And in Federation government.
The federal government.
Yeah.
Now, interestingly, when the Labour Party collapsed, went into disarray after independence in 1977, 1978. By 1979, there were real problems. And there was a motion of no confidence against Patrick John's government, Labour Party government. And there was an interim government and elections in 1980. After all the confusion, and then in 1979, you had August, you had Hurricane David. People were in a state of confusion. The Labour Party is in disarray, different factions, divisions, there's natural disasters. People turned, but just barely, though she won a significant majority in terms of seats in 1980. She only got 51% of the votes. But people turned to her because she appeared to be a stable individual. People don't like confusion, you know. People like stability. If you see a party have confusion in them, people don't like it, you know. They want to be stable. This is why I always talk about unity and solidarity. But Eugenia came into her own in Dominica and in the region through several things. One, she stabilized Dominica, the governance and everything. And then there was her role as head of the OECS at the time, the chairman, to invite, quote unquote, invite America to come and bury the Grenada Revolution after internally they had divided themselves. The revolutionaries killed the revolution, and Reagan came and buried it. Eugenia was involved in the burial. By 1990, she was becoming unpopular, and she still won in 1990, but she got a minority of the votes. And in 1992, she resigned. Eugenia was a free enterprise person, but she also was involved in taking important actions with the state. And she also had a social conscience, though she was tied to the American apron strings. Yet she had a certain elemental nationalism, because she had told the Americans, if you continue this thing about challenging the banana regime before the World Trade Organization, all of us will go ganja and sell the ganja to America. She told them that publicly and also to their face. So she's a complicated woman. But the genius of Rosie Douglas, who followed, was that here was the man who was the furthest left of any political leader in Dominica since independence, was able to reach out across the aisle, so to speak, and incorporate. When Rosie won in 2000, Rosie got 10 of the 11 seats, you know. Freedom had been reduced to 2 seats. Edison James United Workers' Party had been in government from 1995. Because Labour was still divided in 1995. Came into unity under Rosie. The Freedom Party, Eugenia's party, then led by Charles Savarin, didn't go and join the UWP, which had 9 seats to form government, you know. The so-called most right-wing party joined with the most left-wing leader to keep out a set of people whom they considered were not good for Dominica. Very interesting. So the ideological divide, you have to look at it with great maturity. When I know Freedomites were having a second look at Rosie, was one day I was home at Mount Bruce by my mother-in-law's house. She said, just make Rosie down by Astafan them outside. She had a station wagon and Rosie helped her lift some stuff, go in the car. He said, he's not such a bad fella, you know. I quite like him. But why he doesn't take a wife and get some responsibility? I said, Mom, Eugenia older than him, why hasn't she taken a husband? Since I talk in family, it happens always in small islands. You know, my mother-in-law's husband, F.O.C. Harris, was a distinguished lawyer and judge across the Caribbean and also in Africa. Eloise's father. He ran on the Labour ticket in Dominica in 1951 and became a member of the legislature. And he served for 3 years. Just think of it, a man with a master's degree, Luke, from Oxford University, being led by Low Black, who just barely finished primary school. They say, well, he must be a communist. So when people see Eloise and They don't know also what is in the heads of people and their origins and their sources of impulses. And it's a matter which is, and those who don't know, well, let it remain ignorant. Let it remain ignorant, if that's how they want to be. But Eugenia was clearly an outstanding leader who served Dominica well. I would have wished that she wasn't so pro-imperialist. But within Dominica, she did quite well. No. Eugenia's father, Jean-Baptiste Charles, was a Mason, you know, and who grew and made a lot of money. But he was also, Burns, one of the founders of the Penny Bank in Dominica. So she had, in her own history, coming from her father, coming from the grassroots now, and rising. She didn't drop out from the sky into an aristocratic moneyed family. It's the way in which many families build themselves up now. So you have to understand all these when you're looking at the political personalities, how they were formed. And the book I'm writing has some of that.
Thank you, Prime Minister. Are there any other questions? Yes?
Yes, good night, everyone.
Good night.
Prime Minister, I want to thank you so much for the invitation and for the opportunity to have a conversation with you. I'm grateful because I really don't get this audience a lot. But I didn't read the books, just to say, but I really picked up a lot from the two speakers as well, the moderators. So just to the point on page 40, chapter 2, that the Honorable Minister spoke about.
The regional integration book?
Yeah, and the Honorable Minister, she spoke about the fact that we're being better now than we were, maybe decades, a few years ago, I can't remember exactly.
Yes.
In terms of technology and education and health and all of that.
Yes.
And I do agree with that to a large extent, and we are in other things as well. But I really wanted to get your thoughts on where you thought we were in terms of not just locally but regionally as well, of the thought leadership and the consciousness of our civilization here in St. Vincent and in the sub-region and in CARICOM. Because I think growing up in the 80s, 90s, I got at the tail end of the Maurice Bishop and the Walter Rodney, the CLR and all of that sentiment and the fire that was on the ground in the belly and the Marxian kind of movement for change that kind of shaped those ideas for nation building. And now, we have education and technology and healthcare and everything. And the process to kind of superimpose on that, to use that as catalyst to really prop up our leaders, to kind of help them, to guide us in a direction that forges unity and transformative change. Like, I don't know that I don't know where it went, if it exists, but I really would like to know what you think about it, like where we are, and also the impact that has as well on the regional integration movement, the absence of it, whether it's absent or not, and on the local process of the reconstruction, the relief and the recovery. Because I get the sense that everybody thinks the government is supposed to do everything, the Prime Minister is supposed to do everything, but back then in the 80s, there was a sense of community and nation building and pride that drove a lot of what was done beyond just what the government did. So I really would like to have your take, and Dr. Scott as well, because I know you were very much involved in the radical movement.
Now, what happens in the Caribbean is influenced not only by homegrown movements, but also what takes place in the world. At the end, during the Second World War, the central focus from 1939 to to 1945 was to defeat Nazism in Germany and fascism in Italy and their allies, like for instance Japan in the Far East. You may recall that the Allies, certainly after 1941, included the Soviet Union and the United States of America after the BFPs, after the Pearl Harbor invasion by the Japanese in the United States. And that is what was consuming the struggle in that period. Immediately after the Second World War, you had a return to the competition between socialism or centrally planned regimes on one hand and the quote-unquote capitalist West, led by the United States, supported by Europe, and later on, of course, Japan, Korea, Australia, and the like. North America, US, Canada, and Europe. And in the 50s, the challenge began to that in the periphery, began with the anti-colonial struggles in Asia, for instance in Vietnam, but not only there, throughout Africa. The new wave with independence for Ghana, 1957, and subsequently throughout the whole area. Cuba in 1959. So there is a reaction to the dominance of colonialism, the stronger imperialism.
Yeah, I think it's important to underline the role of the Soviet Union and the new United Nations and the commitment to decolonization. I think that's very important.
Absolutely,
yeah.
Absolutely. In the 50s, late 50s and into the 60s, the struggle for civil rights in the United States with Martin Luther King, and then the sharper edge by Malcolm X and Stokely Carmichael.
Kwame Ture.
Kwame Ture.
Kwame Ture, yes.
Kwame Ture.
Yes.
And then they evolved eventually into the Black Panthers. In the Caribbean, we began to see intensity of movements on the left from the 1960s. The Rodney protest was an important spark.
1968.
1968,
yeah.
October the 16th, 1968, in which I had a role as a 22-year-old. Then 1970, the 1970 so-called February Revolution in Trinidad, period of turmoil. We're questioning now the post-independence arrangements. We are seeing some economic growth, but there's equality, there's inequality, there's poverty. The new governments are ruling in a gubernatorial fashion as though they're all colonial type governments and the like. And working people and young people and intellectuals and professionals are reacting against this. You had a number of different trends and tendencies arising. Michael Manley's victory in Jamaica in 1972 over the Jamaica Labour Party. What was happening in Guyana.
Guyana, yes.
Chedi to the left of Burnham, but Burnham also being nationalist and anti-imperialist. A lot of people don't know in that period Burnham provided for the Cuban aircraft, taking troops to Angola to help defend Angola's independence from Portugal. Allow them to land, you know. And Kissinger and Nixon were very upset, and Barbados had done it. Barbados did
Allow the planes to...
Barbados did one trip, and then
Yeah.
the pressure from
To
America.
refuel, a refueling trip.
Yes.
Yes.
The pressure from America, Barrow said, well, he couldn't do it anymore, and Burnham did it. By the way, the Battle of Cuito Valley, where the Cubans defeated the South Africans, Cubans and Angolans defeated the South African troops, helped to prepare the way to open the cell door for Nelson Mandela in South Africa. So all of this is happening. But the different tendencies which were emerging, and you saw it inside of the Caribbean, inside of each of the countries. There was some influence by Marxism, some influence by Garveyism and Black Power, some more revolutionary social democratic. We had in 1979 the revolution in Grenada 1979 on the 13th of March. But a struggle which goes on has its peaks and its troughs. And the God of the mountains is also the God of the plains and also of the valleys. You have to, when you're down and you're low, you have to pick yourself back and come up. We began to see changes in the world affecting. Margaret Thatcher became Prime Minister in Britain. Ronald Reagan became President in the United States, and there's a new assertive right wing taking place. The Grenada government, the People's Revolution in Grenada, they imploded, as I indicated, and then begin to have difficulties in the Soviet Union, especially in Eastern Europe. What was taking place in Czechoslovakia, the Prague Spring in 1968, and then later on in Poland at the Lenin shipyard with Lech Walesa. A reaction set in. And in the period in the 1980s, the right wing was ascendant, and the left progressive forces were on the defensive, and you required a particular kind of discipline and commitment and clarity of thought to find your way through this whole set of difficulties. After the collapse of the Soviet Union and centrally planned regimes, late 1980s, early 1990s, Francis Fukuyama, one of the apostles of the new order of liberal democracy and American triumphalism, proclaimed that the end of history had arrived, that America has won out, and that is that. And there was more or less a unipolar world. And then reaction started to set into that. And then the rise of China and the resurgence in Russia, then the Bolivarian Revolution in Venezuela, and so on. So that you found in the late 1990s into the early 21st century, a resurgence of ideas of change again, but change in a different context than you had in
what we call the new social movement
in the 1960s. So this thing comes in waves because the struggle, the material, remember this, in every mode of production you have contradictions, and those contradictions are made manifest by red, flesh and blood people, organized in groups or classes. And so you have that internally, and you have nations taking positions against nations. And we are in a new period of real turbulence where we have still US dominance, but not untrammeled dominance of the earlier period, now being seriously questioned and opposed, including the mighty US dollar as the principal currency, global currency. Other currencies are coming up. Still not dethroning the US dollar yet, but still getting there. And that there are elements, you're having very nativist wings of monopoly capitalism making themselves manifest in North America, also in Europe. Some of them want to return to a past which never was. But you're always going to have resistance whenever those attempts at hegemony or imperial dominance, where they want to ride roughshod over people's elemental rights or their material concerns. And this has been the nature of history. Now in St. Vincent and the Grenadines and in the Caribbean, we have to find spaces. We have to be in solidarity, we have to work together and find the spaces to be able to develop. But always looking at the world through the prism of our own eyes, but having a responsibility and an obligation to understand what is happening in the world even more than big powers understanding what is happening. Because they could ride roughshod while we have to find the spaces. At the moment, in the Caribbean, we know that there is a difficulty right now where the United States of America is requesting Grenada to put a satellite up. We have had a lot of discussion of that internally. CARICOM had a session which I attended virtually. The OECS had a session too. I've spoken to Prime Minister Mitchell himself. I've spoken to representatives of the American government also. I've spoken to the Venezuelan authorities. Complicated set of questions which are now facing. I don't for 1 minute think that the question of the request for a radar site in Grenada is related only to the issue of, or principally the issue of dealing with narcotic trafficking. I'm sure it has something to do with that, but $80-something% of the traffic of the narcotics we go into the United States come from the western side of South America, not the eastern side, not our side. It's the other side of the other side of the coast. It's more the Pacific coast rather than the Caribbean Atlantic coast. But you're not seeing the degree of activities there. So I have no doubt too that this quest for this radar site is to put some pressure on the regime in Venezuela, the government in Venezuela. So we are waiting in a very complicated period, because if you look at it rationally, given the nature of technology, the question you ask, can't you set up this radar site somewhere else? You may consider Grenada to be the perfect place, but you can put it on a platform in the sea if you want. Out in the ocean, you can the satellites can roam, you can do your, I mean, but if I could figure that out, I'm sure Maduro and his advisors figured that out too. So the world, we are entering a very dangerous period in our history. And we require more than ever clear-sighted, experienced, and balanced leadership to help to take us through this period. This is not the time you want to put a man with a L on the back of your car. You don't need a fella who don't even have his license. You can't give a man a L at a time like this. You need drivers who are experienced and knowledgeable. And I just give you a summary of what is happening. My dear sister, and I can give you chapter and verse. I could write a whole book on what I just talked about there in 5-7 minutes. I'm sure Cleve can do the same thing too. But we are in a very complicated, very, very complicated period. If there is any action against the Venezuelan government from outside, we're going to have problems in St. Vincent and the Grenadines. People run away from conflict. And not only good people run away, but especially bad people run away if they feel they could make money from conflict. And they will go to Trinidad, they will go to Grenada, and they will come to St. Vincent and the Grenadines. Don't think that Caracas is just down the way, you know. Maracaibo is just down the road, you know. Used to have trips from St. Vincent, going down on weekend to buy stuff in Venezuela, you know, on the island closest to us, part of Venezuela. So we can't look at this thing as just idle bystanders. We have to be careful what we say, given the complexity. And you notice my words have been very measured, even that I'm talking without a script, because I've gone over this thing many times in my mind. And I've rehearsed things in my mind as to what I should say and what I should not say. Because ill-spoken words can create unnecessary difficulties. Spoken and unspoken words. So we have to be very measured, yet at the same time be clear and principled. But we are in, what I can say, we are in a very difficult, very, very difficult period. And we just not doing anything could get caught up in it because of migration. What you see is happening in Europe, where you have climate migrants and people who are running away from wars in Africa. People will come up, and some who go to Trinidad first will leave Trinidad and come here and go to Grenada and so on and so forth. It's a time of uncertainty, and you don't want to take risks. You need, one of the things in St. Vincent and the Grenadines we have had in the last 25 years is political stability. Don't underrate that. People take for granted the fact that I never had to fire one single person from the cabinet, and no cabinet members ever resigned. We work together as one, and we go forth. Don't take that for granted. Don't take this stability for granted. There is a unity inside of the government, and there's a clear-sightedness, and there's a maturity of judgment. And when we have to move quickly, we move quickly. When we have to move with patience and a calm, we move with patience and a calm. I repeat, it's a very difficult and challenging period, which calls for wise and experienced hands to deal with some of the challenges around us. Plus, of course, we need to have a clear perspective as to how we own in the future. So that's my answer to you, my dear sister.
Thank you very much, Prime Minister. I see two persons, well, three, and I think we will stop at the third person who has indicated for the night, because although the conversation is very engaging and we can be here all night, we are very mindful of time. Please, sir, let me have your question.
Hi, good night, Prime Minister. Junior Francis here. My thoughts mostly was on CELAC, OECS, and CARICOM. How are they going to be merged with?
How are we going to be?
Linked with BRIC.
With BRICS?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And how they would be working together, if they'll be working as OECS is with us now. You know, merging together as free movement of people and goods.
Now, at the moment, BRICS is an umbrella, not an organization. Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa, and we see Saudi Arabia is aligned with it, and the like. There's a menu of things with the countries under this umbrella looking at, which they could agree on. But there are many things which people in BRICS, countries in BRICS and leaders in BRICS, they have difficulties with. India has its problems with China. The extent to which Brazil can do certain things with Russia and China are also constrained by a whole set of objective factors. One of the matters which is concerning BRICS, are we going to reach the stage of CELAC and CARICOM entangling with BRICS? I don't think that is not going to, that's not on the immediate agenda. Individual countries in Latin America may engage BRICS, like in the way Brazil has done that. They're a foundation member. One of the issues which BRICS is concerned about overall is the way in which the United States of America has started to weaponize the US dollar as the currency of exchange. They use it against Venezuela. They threaten other countries with it, imposing sanctions, keep you out of the SWIFT, SWIFT payment system, corresponding banking relations, all of these things. And that the currency and the payments system have been used as weapons in a political political fight, in a contestation for political and economic ascendancy. And because that has been happening, countries are looking, big countries, China, Russia, India, Brazil, looking for a payment system and the use of currencies where they don't have to go through the SWIFT or use the American dollar. Thus you see Russia is saying that they will sell their oil to people who are buying it in rubles or the Chinese yuan. You will see that Saudi Arabia has signed an agreement with China where they sell certain quantities of petroleum products but getting paid. The sums are not nominated in US dollars but in Chinese yuan. You begin to see a resistance for that because countries do not want and businesses don't want the dollar, which until pretty recently, the last maybe 5, 7, 10 years, 80% of the trade which was done in the world was done through the US dollar. Now it's about 60%. So we see a diminution and a reaction for that. And they want to go into other things, trading arrangements. Chinese, of course, using the Belt and Road Initiative. So all of these, so there are some specific questions. As to freedom of movement and so on, no, that you're going to have that happening. What you're going to have is that within CARICOM, more and more countries are going to sign on to what Belize, Dominica, St. Vincent and Grenadines, and Barbados have done. And we will see that happening. Antigua has a reservation in relation to that because half of our Antigua's population is already people from outside of Antigua. So they're doing their movement long before everybody else was talking about that. So that's a special case. So that'll be my answer to you, Junior. But individual countries would naturally link. Like Venezuela has very good links with China and with Russia. So to Cuba. We don't have links with China. We keep political contact with Russia, and they're with us. We have an honorary consul in Russia. Guyana, Russia's ambassador in Guyana also is ambassador to St. Vincent and the Grenadines. God, we seek to be friends of all, and we strive for a better world because we have to find the spaces, but we find the spaces through multilateralism and through the fundamental precepts of the Charter of the United Nations. Equality of states, the non-interference, non-intervention in another country's affairs. We are in quest of peace, justice, and shared prosperity globally. That's the way we are proceeding with our business. That is why we're very worried about this ramping up of conflict between Venezuela and the United States of America at the United Nations. We call for mature conversation without preconditions between both countries. We call for a similar conversation with the United States and Cuba, just in the same way as we call for that conversation between Venezuela and Guyana, and use Argyle as the locale for us to take the lead for the Argyle Declaration. That is the way we have to conduct our foreign policy, and to link that foreign policy within our interests. But I keep telling everybody who wants to listen, we don't pick a fight with China. We don't have diplomatic relations with them. We don't pick a fight with China. We work with China at the UN. We work with them in the World Bank, the IMF. China is a non-borrowing member of the
CDB.
The CDB. The CDB has lent us most of the money to build the port, and Taiwan has lent us some money to help to build the port. We get a grant from Britain also to help us to build the port. So we function in a principled manner. In the case with China, we want to see peace across the Taiwan Straits, and so on and so forth. This is how we conduct our affairs, in a mature and sensible manner, and always with a patience and a calm, but urgency when urgency is required.
Thank you, Prime Minister. Next question.
Yes, good evening. On the question of regional integration in our Caribbean, my question as a party and a party, but I'll be very brief. The territorial lines between Grenada and St. Vincent and the Grenadines have not been clearly demarcated. Recently, we've been hearing discussions about Grenada and Venezuela and St. Vincent and Grenadines will be having discussions. Just want to find out from you how these will proceed, and how confident are you that there will be success in having these lines, these maritime boundaries clearly demarcated. That's the A. And the B, recently I've been hearing overt statements about covert operations in Venezuela. And I would like to think that perhaps there are also covert operations in the Caribbean as well. There are fault lines that are political fault lines that are showing themselves in the region in recent times. What I want to find out from you, to what extent you believe that these fault lines would emerge into something that would lead to a fracturing or rupturing of what we call the Caribbean region, a zone of peace, a place, one entity that we can survive and continue to work together as one.
Sure. Thanks. We would like to see a demarcation of the maritime boundaries. We have maritime delimitation between ourselves and all our neighbors, including Grenada. We have done it. We have done it with Barbados very easily, with a midpoint between ourselves and Barbados. We have sorted that out and we've signed an agreement some years ago, during my time, since I'm Prime Minister. And we need to proceed with the one with Grenada. Of course, what we always have to follow, what are the overall principles in the national law of the sea and their application in our context, Joel? And I'm sure that we will sort out in a reasonable time these boundary delimitations. And they're important for all kind of reasons. Security purposes, very much so if we are having resources. We do have resources in the sea. And the next frontier for humankind is not just space, but the deep seabed. This is something which, the parts of the deep seabed that human beings haven't gone yet. And to get there, they require particular types of technology. Already, there are some people who want to privatize parts of the deep seabed, as I see people trying to privatize parts of space. So that's again, a very futuristic issue, but it arises from now too. So that'll be my first answer. The second one, CELAC and CARICOM, we have repeatedly, the Community of States of Latin America and the Caribbean, and CARICOM, we have always declared for a long time now that this area is a zone of peace, Latin America and the Caribbean. My dear sister Kamala in Trinidad has a different take on that. And all I will say is that for St. Vincent and the Grenadines, when we talk about, and when generally states talk about a zone of peace in the Caribbean and Latin America, we talk about the not actions from individuals or non-state actors which may disturb the peace in terms of any criminal action. We are talking about no state should take action against another state. And that what we should do, non-interference, non-intervention, but what we should do is to cooperate all of us together in fighting criminal activities perpetrated by non-state actors. Like, for instance, those who want to involve in the trafficking in drugs, trafficking in persons, money laundering connected to these enterprises and the like. So when you say that a place is a zone of peace, Joel, you're relating it in international legal terms as an absence of war and an absence of open conflict between states taking place in the Caribbean and Latin America. This doesn't mean that you don't have criminal activities. The presence of criminal activities doesn't mean that you're not a zone of peace. If that is so, there's no place in the world that there's a zone of peace, because, you know, crime is universal by non-state actors, so that it makes, with great respect, not a sufficient utility to use criminal activity as a defining element of the absence of peace.
Yeah.
So, and I will urge my sister Kamala to have some reflection on that particular point that I'm making. That's the second thing. The third point, and you notice I'm using language in relation to my dear sister, not of any harsh kind or controversial. I'm just saying that we have a different perspective on this issue, and I happen to think that her perspective on it in legal, juridical, international legal terms hasn't been thought through sufficiently, and that we must have a further thinking on it. The third matter is what is happening with activities taking place. Well, it is unfortunate and very disturbing to hear that one country, a big country, saying that they have given their intelligence agencies the go ahead to destabilize another country, their economy and everything. But I just want to remind everyone this. This is now carrying it to an extreme level. But in February 2015, and we tend to forget things, or we don't go back to them, in February 2015, President Obama signed an executive order declaring Venezuela to be a threat to the national security of the United States of America. Well, now, that was an absurdity. How could Venezuela, a small country with 30 million people, be a threat to a country with 350 million, the biggest economy in the world, all the weapons and all the rest of things? It's not, but Obama had set this matter in train. That executive order has not been reversed. Well, now, if you declare that a country is a threat to your national security, and that has now been on the book, so to speak, for 8 years, what is happening is a logical extension of that in a different period, and that is why the original declaration, in my view, was wrong-headed and even irresponsible. So, we are where we are with this, and there's need more than ever for a mature conversation. The question is this: does the United States of America think that the time has passed for conversation? And have they made a decision to go beyond conversation and to go beyond threats? I don't know. I have my own conclusion in my head, which I will not articulate. But that is all adds to the difficult period in which we are. The power of the United States is not to be underestimated. Yet at the same time, the United States of America must not overestimate the impact of its power. Because there is also the power which is used wrongly, unjustifiably. Historically, such power has met with resistance, which is part of the answer which I gave to your earlier question. But the long and short of it, we are in a difficult period. And Joel, the nefarious activities don't have to only be in respect of people using sabotage to undermine your economy. The CIA did that against Manley in the period 1972 to 1980, particularly 1978, 79, 1980. It caused a lot of problems in Jamaica, which gave rise to the Siaga government in 1980 and kept the PNP out of office for a little while. But right in St. Vincent and the Grenadines now, today, there are attempts to undermine our democracy. The NDP can scoff at what I'm saying here, but they know I have the evidence. If they don't know that I have the evidence, they will be living in a different world. The fact is this: they want to be agents. They want to be sellers of our passport and citizenship. And the passport of St. Vincent and the Grenadines, along with Bahamas and Barbados, are the three most desirable passports in the Caribbean. You have these people who have been, since 2001, fighting the Unity Labour Party. And they now want, in the dying stages of selling passports, which passes under the rubric of CBI, citizenship by investment, that they wager that they may have another year and a half, 2 years maximum in this, because this thing is coming to an end. The time is growing shorter and shorter because of the opposition of US, Canada, Britain, and Europe. And time is running out on that program. But these guys want to make a killing in the short period. And they're combining that with some people, some companies in China. I'm not talking about the Chinese government, some companies in China who are conjoining this activity. And the additional thing for them is to see if they can have the ULP government removed, because the NDP would sell passports and citizenship, and the NDP will break its relations from Taiwan to China. That is their, and they have hired a firm in the United Kingdom. I know the name of the firm. They are actively running the NDP campaign. I know what they're doing. I know their strategy. I don't know all the detailed tactical maneuvers, but I know their broad strategic approach. And they gain a lot of money from I'm talking about the people who run in the campaign gain a lot of money. There are people here in St. Vincent and the Grenadines. Radio stations are paid on a monthly basis. Individuals who appear in programs are paid on a monthly basis in US dollars from the same accounts. I know it. Of course, I see one man who writes, who has an online publication, say I'm presenting the evidence. I only say I have the evidence. I don't have any responsibility to him or anybody else to present the evidence in the manner in which they would wish it, because to do so would reveal my source. I am born yesterday. But I'm telling you that is happening right now. And before the campaign is finished, I will call the name of the firm in the United Kingdom. And you'll be able to go online and look up the firm. And this firm only works for right-wing political parties. British firm. They fired the people from SCL, Cambridge Analytica. I'm talking the passport people whom they had been using before. And that man who headed SCL called me a few weeks ago, says to me that he wants to work for the winning team in St. Vincent. He wants to come and now work for me. I told him he tried to defeat me since 2001. He didn't defeat me. He said, you want to come? I said, the question is that I wouldn't be able to trust you. I said, suppose you're a fifth columnist. Suppose they're paying you to come to me. I said, no, I ain't. Well, again, I ain't born yesterday. My eyes have seen a lot. So, it's happening, Joel, right here, as I speak to you. They're trying to see if they could buy these elections. They wouldn't succeed for the simple reason that these people out of the UK, as good as they are, don't know St. Vincent and the Grenadines as well as we do know. And already they have been making mistakes. For instance, they refer in one of their points about residential electricity. We don't call things residential electricity here. There are 3 types of electricity: domestic, commercial, and industrial. I'll tell you how they frame them. Then, when you're talking about assisting the poor, we don't talk in proper terms about poor relief. You may say so in the taverns, but if you're doing something, you don't insult the poor in that way, because the law addresses public assistance. But that notion from the old poor law in Britain is infecting the minds of these Australian British. I've gone a little further. So they will know that I know. And they're making many mistakes. The extent of the public assistance. They don't know about the student loan rate. They Google the last thing which they see, and they ain't listening so well to Friday them, and they're just running it. And the problem with the NDP is that the passport people is giving the money to these people who managing the campaign, and not to them directly, because they don't trust them to spend the money. They think they will spend it on the mortgage. You know what I mean? So this is how. So they're fighting here. They want this, and they feel that if they shake here, they could shake 1 or 2 other places nearby which they want to control. Like, for instance, I'm talking about the Chinese companies, maybe St. Lucia. It's a battle ongoing. And don't think that is not real. It's real, Cleve. And but I'm 100% sure that the people are listening to what I'm saying about this thing, and that people like that would not succeed in St. Vincent and Grenadines. There's one other thing too which is personal for them, because they have been defeated so many times. There was a whistleblower who came to me from their organization, and the main man involved, who had been involved historically with their campaign from the UK, the NDP's campaign, and the king of passports, go into their office. They have a poster of me, each of them. And when they go, they have darts. And they take the darts and they throw it at me, in my eye, my nose, my mouth, and so on, and they put on the poster. So it's personal, because for them too, it's how can they be defeated for 25 years? So it has become personal. I don't have anything personal against them, because all I'm concerned about defending the patrimony of St. Vincent and the Grenadines. And I tell you one thing, St. Vincent and the Grenadines will never, not while I'm alive, I'm telling you this, never sell our passports and our citizenship. Not one time alive.
Thank you very much, Honorable Prime Minister. And I think this is a fitting note on which we can end tonight's conversation. But I'm sure that the conversation will continue as we press on.
And Kisal has done magnificently tonight.
Thank you.
And so too Cleve Scott. The evening is far better than I ever contemplated, and it's as you notice, I could go all night. Anytime when elections are in the air, I get a special energy. I don't stop, and I love the energy.
Thank you, Prime Minister. And this is my moment to feel like Oprah Winfrey and say that every member of our studio audience will receive a copy of the 2 publications that were mentioned tonight and featured tonight. And the Honorable Prime Minister will be signing some of these copies before we leave. Prime Minister, thank you very much.
I won't be able to sign for everybody.
But you'll sign some.
Yeah.
You'll sign a few. And on this note, I invite Comrade Rodan John to deliver the vote of thanks.
Thank you very much, moderator. Good evening, everyone, and I don't want to stand between your time and your sleep as I am here, but it's a truly an honor to bring the vote of thanks for the official launch of Ideas That Shape a Nation. Tonight, we witness the unveiling of 2 books, Regional Integration in Our Caribbean and Labour is Working for All, the Unity Labour Party of St. Vincent and the Grenadines. First and foremost, we must thank Almighty God for giving us the opportunity to be here. We also would like to extend a deepest appreciation to our Prime Minister and political leader, Comrade Dr. Ralph E. Gonsalves. Your intellect, your wisdom, and enduring love for the people of St. Vincent and the Grenadines continue to shape our national story. We also extend sincere thanks to Dr. Cleve Scott for your insightful and thoughtful, provoking engagement with the Honorable Prime Minister. To Minister Kisal Peters, thank you for your skillful moderation and guiding the discussion with clarity and confidence. We also acknowledge and thank Dr. Randy Brewster for opening us with a word of prayer, Ms. Sherry Denny for the national anthem, and Comrade Luke Bong for your thoughtful introduction of our distinguished guests. To the organizing committee, the Office of the Prime Minister, Mr. Julian Francis and his team, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and Foreign Trade, we applaud your meticulous planning and dedication. Your efforts remind us that labor is working for all of us, both on stage and behind the scenes. To the media, VC3, API, NBC Radio, Steve, STV Online, Dynamic Guys, for the song system. Thank you for ensuring that this moment reaches every corner of our country. And to all those joining us online, your virtual presence reflects the spirit of labor and learning knows no boundaries. And finally, to each of you who are here tonight, we thank you for your time, your energy, and your continued belief in the power of ideas to shape a nation. Comrades, as we leave here, let us be inspired by the ideas that shape our nation, motivated that labor is working for all, and confident that we will own the future. Thank you, and may God bless you all, and may God bless our beloved nation, St. Vincent and the Grenadines.